Two debt collectors banged on my dorm door and calmly told me I owed nearly $80,000. I didn't even own a credit card. Within 24 hours, I pulled my credit report, called my parents, and realized someone had been using my name since I was 15. On Thanksgiving, I decided to stop paying for their secrets. The first time someone pounded on my dorm room door hard enough to shake the frame, I honestly thought it was one of the guys from down the hall messing around. It was a Thursday afternoon in late November. Outside, the Ohio sky was this flat, gray sheet pressing down on campus. Inside, my tiny dorm room smelled like stale ramen and highlighters. I was hunched over my laptop trying to finish a political science paper before my night shift at the library. The knock came again, louder, sharper. The kind of knock that says, "Open up, we're not going away." I pulled off my headphones, heart picking up. My roommate Tasha looked up from her side of the room, eyebrow arched. "You expecting somebody?" she asked. "No," I said, already standing. Probably Kyle being an idiot. I crossed the room, fingers brushing the chipped paint on the door handle, and pulled it open. Two men in dark coats stood in the hallway. They weren't campus security, and they definitely weren't students. One was in his 40s, stocky, with a shaved head and a clipboard tucked under his arm. The other was taller, thinner, a worn leather briefcase hanging from his hand. Both wore those polite, empty smiles you only ever see on people who are about to ruin your day. "Ethan Carter?" the stocky one asked. The way he said my name made the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. "Yeah?" I said, suddenly very aware that I was standing there in sweatpants and a university hoodie with a coffee stain on the front. "I'm Mr. Dalton, this is Mr. Ruiz," he said, as if that meant something to me. "We're with Horizon Recovery Services. We need to talk to you about your outstanding balance." Behind me, I felt rather than saw Tasha freeze. "My what?" I asked. "Your outstanding balance," he repeated, voice flattening, totaling $79,834.17 as of this morning. For a second, I honestly thought I misheard him. Numbers like that didn't belong in my life. I was a second-year student with a work-study job, a beat-up Honda, and exactly $17 in my checking account until my next paycheck. $79,000 only existed in tuition bills and other people's problems. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, trying to laugh it off. "I don't owe." He cut me off by lifting the clipboard and flipping a page with his thumb. "Ethan James Carter," he read. "Date of birth, April 14th. Social Security ending in 7291. Current address, Rawlings Hall, room 314. You're the right person." My mouth went dry. I hadn't given anyone my Social Security number since filling out FAFSA. Tasha stood up behind me. I could feel her eyes on the back of my neck. This is some kind of mistake," I said. "I don't have any debt. I don't even have a credit card." Mr. Ruiz finally spoke, his voice softer but no less firm. "Mr. Carter, we're not here to argue. We're here to inform you that several of your accounts are in serious delinquency. We've attempted to contact you at the mailing address and phone number on file multiple times." Phone number? Mailing address? My cell hadn't changed in 3 years. My campus mailbox was mostly empty pizza flyers. "Can we take this somewhere else?" Tasha muttered behind me. I realized half the hall was now peeking out of cracked doors, drawn by the commotion. Heat rose up my neck. Shame blooming for something I didn't even understand. "I'm sorry," I said, stepping into the doorway, blocking their view of my room. "There's been some kind of mistake. I really don't know what you're talking about." Mr. Dalton's eyes hardened in that way people get when they've heard the same line 100 times. "Mr. Carter," he said, "you've accumulated balances on 4 separate credit cards and 1 personal loan, all opened in your name over the last 5 years. Minimum payments haven't been made in several months. This balance isn't going to disappear because you claim ignorance." 5 years. I was 19. A cold, crawling feeling slid down my spine. "Look, you can't just show up at a dorm," Tasha snapped suddenly, stepping up beside me like a tiny, furious shield. "If this is legit, you can send something through the mail. You can't harass students on campus like this." "We're not harassing anyone," Mr. Ruiz said, lifting his briefcase slightly. "We're delivering notice, that's all. Mr. Carter, you've officially been informed. You'll be receiving paperwork at your registered home address as well. I suggest you speak with your parents. He glanced at the clipboard again. Linda and Mark Carter, and call the number on this card within 7 days. He held out a business card. I stared at it for a beat, then took it with fingers that didn't quite feel like mine. "We'll be in touch," Mr. Dalton said. Then they turned and walked down the hall, their footsteps muffled on the industrial carpet, leaving a wake of whispers behind them. The door clicked shut behind me, and I just stood there, staring at the white wood as if it might start talking. "Ethan," Tasha said carefully, "what the hell was that?" I looked down at the card in my hand. Horizon Recovery Services. An 800 number. A grim-looking logo. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I have no idea," I said. "I swear to God, Tash, I've never—" "I know," she said quickly. "I know you. You freak out if your account goes under $50. You're not secretly racking up 80 grand of debt on designer shoes." Her attempt at a joke barely landed. My head was buzzing, thoughts chasing each other in frantic circles. $80,000. Credit cards and a loan opened 5 years ago. I swallowed hard. When I was 14, I sank onto my desk chair, the room tilting slightly. "What if it's like identity theft?" Tasha said, already sitting at her own desk, fingers flying on her keyboard. "People do that all the time. Maybe someone got your social somehow." "How?" I muttered, mostly to myself. "I mean, my social is written down in like 2 places. FAFSA, my bank, and at home for taxes." The word home lodged in my chest like a stone. My parents' faces flashed in my mind. Dad at the kitchen table, brow furrowed over bills. Mom in her scrubs after another double shift at the hospital. We'd never had a lot, but they always said they were managing. We didn't go on fancy vacations, but there was always food, always heat. They'd been so proud when my scholarships came through. "You're our ticket, kiddo," Dad had said, clapping my shoulder. "You do well in college, you won't have to worry about money the way we did." Now some stranger had just told me I was buried under debt I'd never even seen. "First thing," Tasha said, spinning her laptop around, "you need to pull your credit report, like right now." I stared at the screen. The words "free annual credit report" blurred for a second before snapping back into focus. "My credit report," I repeated, like if I said the words slowly enough they'd mean something else. In the pit of my stomach, a small, horrible certainty started to form. I didn't want to name it. We went through the process together. Name, address, social security number. It felt surreal typing in my own information, like I was logging into someone else's life. When the report finally loaded, a dense wall of text and numbers, my hands were shaking. "Okay," Tasha said gently. "Scroll down, look at the accounts section." My eyes fell on the list. It was like someone had dumped a bucket of ice water into my veins. There they were, 5 accounts. Capital State Platinum, open 2019, balance $22,467, past due. Union Line Rewards, open 2018, balance $15,230, charged off. Metro Credit Gold, open 2017, balance $9,814, 120 days late. Sunrise Bank Personal Loan, open 2018, original amount $25,000, current balance $18,302, collections. And another. Holy. Tasha breathed. "I never opened these," I whispered. My voice sounded thin and far away, like it was bouncing off the ceiling. I clicked on one of the accounts with numb fingers. The details expanded. Address on file, 174 Willow Lane, Dayton, OA, my childhood home. My room suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Tasha's eyes flicked to the address and then to me. I didn't miss the way her lips parted. "Ethan," she said slowly. "That's my parents' house," I finished. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the faint hum of the dorm heater. Identity theft. Sure. Technically, that's what this was. But the thief wasn't some stranger on the internet. The thief had my last name. I scrolled through more details. Every account had the same pattern, the same home address, the same phone number, our old landline. The one my mom had refused to get rid of because, what if there's an emergency and your cell is dead? They'd kept the emergency line busy, all right. Right there on the screen, in black and white, was the thing I hadn't let myself say out loud. My parents had been opening credit in my name since I was 15. The room tilted again. I grabbed the edge of my desk to steady myself. Tasha was watching me, her face a mix of anger and pity. "You need to call them," she said quietly. I nodded, but my hand hovered over my phone for a long time before I finally picked it up. My thumb moved almost on its own, pressing Mom's contact. The ringing seemed to go on forever. "Hey, sweetheart!" Mom's bright voice burst through. "How's my college boy? Are you eating enough? You sound thin." I almost laughed. Thin. Yeah, something inside me definitely felt like it was wasting away. "Mom," I said, cutting her off. "Two guys from a collection agency just showed up at my dorm." There was a tiny pause, just long enough for my heart to notice. "A what?" she asked, tone shifting just slightly. "Horizon Recovery Services," I said, staring at the credit report. "They said I owe almost $80,000 on credit cards and a loan I never opened, all of them attached to your address." On the other end of the line, the clatter of dishes stilled. I could hear the TV in the background, Dad's usual sports channel, low. "Oh, honey, that must be some mistake," she said, but the bright tone was gone. Her words were careful now. "You know how these scammers are, they'll say anything to." "I pulled my credit report," I said. "The accounts are real, opened between 2017 and 2019, when I was in high school, using my social and your address." Silence. For a second I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard the faint sound of her breathing. "Put Dad on the phone," I said. My voice surprised me. It was calm. Too calm. "Ethan." "Now, Mom." Another pause. A muffled, "Mark, get in here," then the shuffle of the phone changing hands. "Hey, kiddo." Dad's voice, deeper, rougher. "What's going on? Your mom says some idiots came to campus?" "They're not idiots," I said. "They're debt collectors. For my debt. Except it's not my debt, is it?" A beat. Two. I could almost hear the gears turning in his brain. "Listen," he finally said, and that one word told me everything I needed to know. Guilt slipped into the room like a draft under a door. So it was true. They'd done it. My own parents had been using my name, my credit, my future as their personal line of credit. "How long?" I asked. My hand was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "Just tell me how long." "We were going to tell you," Dad said too quickly. "We just needed a little help, Ethan. You know how things have been since your mom's hours got cut and the hospital changed insurance and—" "A little help?" My voice cracked on the last word. $80,000, Dad. That's not a little help." "It's not that bad," he snapped, defensive now. "Those companies always inflate the numbers. And anyway, we've been making payments, mostly, until recently. Things got tight, and we figured once you graduate and start making real money, you'd—" "Pay off debts I never agreed to," I said. The silence that followed was heavier than anything they'd said. I felt something in my chest splinter. Not completely break, just crack. Enough for the cold to seep in. "Do you have any idea what this does to me?" I whispered. "To my credit? To my ability to get an apartment after college? A car? A loan? I might not even be able to get a student loan next year if my scholarships don't cover everything." "Oh, come on," Dad said. "Don't be dramatic. We're family. Families help each other. When you were born, we put your name on things so we could keep the house. You wouldn't even have a home if we hadn't done that. And college? Who do you think worked extra shifts to buy your books?" Mom's voice floated faintly in the background. "Mark, don't—" "No, Linda," he said sharply. "He needs to hear this. You kids today, you think money grows on trees. We did what we had to do. What we had to do. Use our teenage son's identity as collateral. I'd heard stories like this one in abstract, in those Reddit AITA threads Tasha loved reading out loud. I'd always thought, man, that sucks, but at least my parents would never. Now I was the story. "I'm going to fix this," I said slowly. Each word felt like it was being pulled out of some deeper, darker place inside me. "But not the way you think. I'm going to call the credit card companies, the loan servicers, the credit bureaus. I'm going to tell them I was a minor when most of these accounts were opened and that I didn't authorize any of it." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "You wouldn't," Dad hissed. "You'd get your own parents thrown in jail over some numbers on a screen?" That was the thing that finally made the splinter in my chest give way completely. Because in that one sentence, he'd told me what I was worth to him. Not a son, not a person, just a credit line. "If the shoe fits," I said, my voice gone flat. "I didn't put you in this position. You did, and we're going to talk about all of this properly at Thanksgiving." "Ethan," I hung up. For a long moment, I just sat there, phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone echoing faintly before the line went dead. My pulse thundered in my ears. Tasha didn't say anything. She just walked over and sat on the edge of my bed, close enough that our knees almost touched. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. I looked up at the gray sky through the narrow dorm window. A flock of birds cut across it, dark shapes moving in perfect formation towards somewhere warmer. "First," I said, "I'm going to call every number on this report. I'm going to get copies of every application, every card agreement, every statement, anything with my name and their handwriting on it." I turned back to the computer, jaw set. "Then," I continued, the first threads of something hard and sharp weaving themselves into my voice, "I'm going to go home for Thanksgiving, and I'm bringing all of it with me. The credit report, the statements, the lies. And I was going to lay them on the table right between the turkey and the mashed potatoes, in front of every aunt, uncle, cousin, and grandparent who thought my parents were saints. If my life was going to blow up, I wasn't going to be the only one standing in the blast radius. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, numbers pulsed behind my eyelids. 79,834 Account opened, 10/12/2017. Applicant, me. By 2 in the morning, my desk was covered in sticky notes and scribbled lists. Tasha had fallen asleep with her headphones on, an arm flung over her face. Outside, the hallway had gone quiet, the usual drunken laughter replaced by the low hum of the building's boiler. I stared at the credit report again. It almost felt like if I looked at it long enough, it would rearrange itself, reveal a different truth. It didn't. I picked up the Horizon recovery card and my phone. The plastic dug into my palm. When I dialed, my thumb hovered over the last digit for a second. If I didn't press it, if I didn't call, maybe this could stay a nightmare instead of turning into my life. I pressed it. "Horizon Recovery Services," a bored-sounding woman said after 2 rings. "This is Kendra. All calls may be recorded for quality and training purposes. How may I direct your call?" "My name is Ethan Carter," I said. My voice sounded more solid than I felt. "2 of your agents came to my dorm today. They said I owe you almost $80,000. There was a slight pause as she typed. Keys clicked. "Okay, sir, can I have your date of birth and the last 4 of your social?" I hesitated, then gave them. At this point, my information was already out there. Another pause, more typing. "Yes, I see your file here," she said. "Several accounts in collection. How can I assist you today?" "You can start," I said, "by telling me where these debts came from, because I didn't open any of these accounts." She exhaled slowly through her nose, like she'd heard that 1,000 times. "Sir, the original creditors have verified your identity with application information." "I was 15 when the first credit card was opened," I cut in. "That's illegal. I couldn't legally sign anything. I didn't apply for these. Someone else used my information. At your end, that's application information. At mine, that's fraud." That made her stop. I could almost hear her sitting up straighter. "You were a minor when some accounts were opened?" she repeated. "Yes," I said. "I pulled my credit report. The first account dates back 5 years. I just learned about any of it today when your guys came to my door. I want copies of every signed application, every contract, any ID documents you or the original creditors have that were used to open these accounts." "That would have to go through the original creditors," she said, but her tone had shifted, less bored, more careful. "We're just the collection agency. But I can notate your file that you're disputing the validity of the debt and that you're alleging identity theft. That will pause active collection while the dispute is investigated." I swallowed, paused, not erased, not fixed, just paused. "Fine," I said. "Do it and give me the contact information for every original creditor you have on file." It took almost an hour. By the time I hung up, my hand ached from writing. I had a list of numbers and department names and a new, thin layer of exhaustion over the rage. When I put the phone down, Tasha rolled over and peered at me through one half-open eye. "You okay?" she mumbled. "No," I said honestly. She sighed and flopped onto her back. "Wake me up when we burn capitalism to the ground." Despite everything, a laugh burst out of me. It sounded raw, but it was something. By dawn, I'd talked to 3 credit card companies and 1 bank loan department. Each conversation blurred into the next. Security questions, hold music, transfers. Every time I said the words "I was a minor," I felt like I was scraping my tongue over broken glass. Some reps were skeptical, some sympathetic. One older woman from Sunrise Bank surprised me. "Sweetheart," she said after I explained the situation, "do you have any idea who might have done this?" I looked at the dorm wall, at the stupid poster of a mountain I'd bought during orientation because it said "Reach your peak" in big letters. "Yeah," I said quietly, "I do." She sighed. It was the kind of sigh you can only make if you've heard this story before. "We can send you copies of the original applications," she said. "They'll have the signature and, if we collected it, a copy of the ID used. Maybe utility bills. We'll also send you an identity theft packet. You'll need to fill that out, probably file a police report and send everything back. It's a process. I'm not going to lie to you." "How long?" I asked. "Months," she said. "Sometimes longer, but if it's confirmed you didn't authorize these, it can come off your file, especially accounts opened when you were underage." Months. I had a midterm next week, a research project due in 2. My biggest concern 24 hours ago had been whether I could afford concert tickets. Now my life was measured in months and police reports. "Okay," I said. My voice wobbled only a little. "Send everything, please." When I finally closed my laptop, the pale winter sun was pushing through the clouds. Tasha was awake now, her hair a chaotic halo around her head. She handed me a mug of instant coffee. "You look like you aged 10 years, she said, sitting cross-legged on her bed. "I feel like it," I said, taking a sip. It was terrible. It was also the best thing I'd ever tasted. "Did any of them say you have to press charges against your parents?" she asked carefully. "They all said I'd probably have to file a police report," I said, "against the identity thief, which is technically my parents, but they don't need names for the initial dispute, just the report number." We sat with that for a minute. "Are you going to?" she asked. I stared into the swirling film on my coffee. "If I do it now," I said slowly, "they'll get a notice. They'll start hiding things, destroying evidence, blaming me. If there's one thing my parents are good at, it's making themselves look like the victims." "So what's the play?" she asked. I looked at the growing pile of notes on my desk. Directions from reps, request forms to print, case numbers. "I get the proof first," I said. "The applications, the signatures, the ID copies. I build the whole picture, then I take it home." "Ethan," Tasha's voice had a warning thread in it now. "I'm not going to show up with just a feeling and let them gaslight me into thinking I imagined the last 24 hours, I said. "I'm going to show up with facts, with documents, with their handwriting next to my name, in front of people they care about impressing." I thought of Thanksgiving. My mom's side of the family always did it big. Aunt Diane's massive dining room, folding chairs squeezed between the china cabinet and the piano. The kids' table in the corner, where I'd sat until I was grown up enough to join the main table. Uncles dissecting football plays. My grandmother complaining about salt. My dad pouring drinks, always a little too loud with the laughter, a little too quick with the second helpings. They loved an audience, my parents. They loved being the hardworking, generous couple who sacrificed everything for their kids. They told that story like it was a script. I was going to flip the script. "You're going to nuke Thanksgiving," Tasha said slowly. Her eyes were wide, but there was a glint of admiration there. "You're actually going to do it." "They were willing to nuke my entire adult life," I said. "Turnabout is fair play," she nodded once. "Then we'd better make sure you have everything you need." The next week was a blur of classes, work shifts, and an extra full-time job called untangling my parents' mess. Every day, between lectures and shelving books at the library, I checked my email obsessively. The first documents arrived 3 days later as password-protected PDFs from Capital State. When I opened the first file, my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear Tasha's breathing next to me. There it was, a scanned application, slightly crooked on the page. Name, Ethan Carter. Social, mine. Income, $48,000 a year. I snorted. I'd been bagging groceries for $9 an hour after school that year. The only way I could make $48,000 was if you added both my parents' incomes and maybe included the loose change in the couch. I scrolled down. At the bottom, there was a signature. It was trying very hard to be my signature, but it wasn't. I knew my own messy scrawl. This was neater. Too neat. The The lowercase t's were crossed high, like my mom's. The loop on the H was exactly like Dad's from the permission slips he'd signed in high school. It was both of them. They hadn't even tried that hard to disguise it. Jesus, Tasha whispered. They're not even good at crime. More documents came. Metro Credit, Union Line, Sunrise Bank, each one another little betrayal in Times New Roman. Some had a photocopy of a driver's license attached. My face, my name, except the address was 174 Willow Lane, and the issue date, I zoomed in, issued 0814. I remembered that day. Dad had taken me to the BMV, big hand clapping my shoulder. We'll get you licensed, then maybe start looking at cars, he'd said. I'd been so excited about the freedom of a driver's license. I hadn't noticed what he'd handed the clerk. The picture matched. But the address on the card in the scan wasn't my dorm address, like my current one. It was our house. They'd used my brand new legit ID as if I were an adult who could consent to any of this. I printed everything, page after page. The cheap dorm printer wheezed in protest. By the time I was done, I had a stack of paper thick enough to use as a doorstop. Tasha helped me sort it into folders. Creditor by creditor, she muttered, labeling tabs with a Sharpie. We should make it idiot-proof. Even your Uncle Larry should be able to follow this at the table. I snorted. Uncle Larry can't follow a recipe on a pancake mix box. Then this will be his character development arc, she said, deadpan. When I wasn't gathering evidence, I was learning just how deep the damage went. A meeting with the campus financial aid advisor revealed that, yes, if these delinquencies stayed on my report, certain loans and grants might be off the table next year. Is there anything you can do? I asked, fingers twisting in my lap. The advisor, a kind woman named Miss Patel, looked at me over her glasses. If these were opened when you were a minor and you're formally disputing them, that helps, she said. But it's a process. You might want to talk to the campus legal clinic. They can't represent you in court, but they can advise you on steps. The phrase, campus legal clinic, made my stomach clench, but I nodded. The clinic was in a musty office off the student union. The student attorney I met with, a third-year law student named Marcus, listened carefully as I laid everything out. When I finished, he blew out a low whistle. Dude, he said, I thought my parents were bad with money. I managed a weak smile. He leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Here's the thing, what your parents did. That is textbook identity theft. The fact that you're related doesn't change that, legally speaking. You have grounds to dispute. You have grounds to press charges. I know, I said quietly. But, he went on, you also have to live with the consequences of that. Criminal cases against parents are messy, emotionally, socially, sometimes practically. If they're convicted, their ability to support themselves changes. If they go bankrupt, it might limit what you can recover from them. I'm not doing this to get money out of them, I said, sharper than I intended. I just don't want my future trashed because they couldn't stop swiping. He nodded. Totally valid. So, step 1 is what you're already doing. Get all documentation from creditors. Step 2, file an identity theft report with the FTC and a police report. You don't have to name them explicitly in the report, just state that someone used your information without consent. Step 3, send all that with dispute letters to the creditors and the credit bureaus. And Thanksgiving, he added, one corner of his mouth quirking up. I blinked. What? You mentioned you wanted to confront them at Thanksgiving, he said. I'm not here to advise on family drama strategy, but as a human being, make sure you have support. Someone in that room who's on your side. Because your parents, they're probably going to deny, deflect, project. People like that don't roll over because you show them paperwork. Someone on my side. Immediately, I thought of my cousin Jenna. Jenna was older by 4 years. She'd grown up one town over, but spent every holiday with us. She'd left for law school in Chicago last year and had become a kind of mythic figure in the family. Our Jenna, the lawyer, Grandma would say to anyone who would listen. If anyone could help me keep my footing in a room full of denial, it was her. That night, I called her. She answered on the third ring, background noise of a city humming through the line. Ethan, to what do I owe the pleasure? She said. I could hear the smile in her voice. I didn't waste time. Jenna, I said, I need legal-ish advice, moral support, and possibly someone to catch me when I faint at Thanksgiving. There was a beat of silence. Well, she said slowly. That sounds ominous. I told her everything, the collectors, the credit report, the accounts, the conversations with my parents. By the time I finished, her easy humor was gone. Holy shit, she breathed. They really did that. Yeah, I said. My voice sounded tired even to me. You okay? She asked. No, I said, but I'm functioning. I heard her exhale. Okay, first of all, I'm glad you called me. Second, I'm home for Thanksgiving. You know that, right? I'll be there. Relief washed through me so suddenly I had to sit down. Thank God, I said, because I'm planning on dropping this bomb in the middle of Aunt Diane's dining room, and I figured it would be good to have someone there who understands phrases like fraudulent application and criminal liability. She snorted. I understand those phrases very well. Here's my advice, for what it's worth. Don't accuse them of crimes in front of the whole family without proof. Let the documents speak for themselves. Ask questions instead of screaming statements. Can you explain why my name is on this? Can you explain this signature? It makes them show their hand. I can do that, I said slowly. I think. And Ethan? She added. Yeah? Be prepared for people to take their side at first, she said gently. Your parents have been building their narrative for years. You'll be the one changing the story. People cling to the first version they hear, even if it's a lie. The idea of my aunts and uncles, the people who'd ruffled my hair and given me birthday money, looking at me like I was the villain made my stomach twist. But the truth has weight, she went on. Eventually it lands, especially when it's backed by paper. And if anyone tries to turn this back on you, I'll be there. Promise. My throat tightened. Thanks, I managed. Hey, she said, voice softening. They may have used your name, but this mess, it's not who you are. Don't let them convince you otherwise. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, the glow of my laptop painting my hands ghostly blue. Outside, the first flakes of snow began to fall, swirling in the beam of the parking lot light. Thanksgiving break came faster than I expected. 1 minute I was cramming for exams and shelving overdue books. The next I was tossing a duffel bag into the back of my Honda, my folder of documents carefully tucked under the passenger seat. Tasha stood beside the car, arms wrapped around herself against the wind. You sure you don't want me to hide in the trunk and live stream this? She asked. Yes, I said, laughing despite the nerves coiling in my gut. Pretty sure assaulting my parents with the truth is enough. I don't need accomplices. She sobered a little, stepping closer to rest a hand on my arm. Hey, she said, if at any point you need an extraction, you text me the turkey emoji. I'll call and pretend there's a campus emergency. You're going to stage a fake fire drill? I asked. I will stage a fake alien invasion if it gets you out of there in one piece, she said firmly. Warmth spread through my chest, cutting through some of the dread. Thanks, Tash, I said. For everything. She shrugged, looking awkward. That's what roommates are for. Now go blow up your family dinner. The drive to Dayton felt different this time. I'd made the trip a dozen times since starting college. Usually it was a progression of familiar landmarks. The gas station with the giant fiberglass cow, the billboard for a personal injury lawyer with ridiculous hair, the faded "Welcome to Dayton" sign. This time, each mile marker felt like a countdown. By the time I turned onto Willow Lane, my hands were slick on the steering wheel. The house looked the same. Blue siding, sagging porch, the front yard leaves raked into the usual half-hearted piles. The only nod to the holiday was a plastic turkey decoration by the front steps. For a moment, I sat in the car, engine idling, staring at the front door. Memories crowded in. Me at 6, darting through the doorway in a Power Rangers costume, candy bag clutched in my fist. Mom at the stove, stirring gravy, face flushed with heat and happiness. Dad on the couch, half asleep, football game flickering on TV. It all felt like scenes from a movie someone else had lived. I turned the key. The engine died. For a second, the silence was absolute. Then distant laughter drifted from up the street. Aunt Diane's house, the center of the storm I was about to walk into. I grabbed the folder from under the seat. The weight of it seemed disproportionate to its size. Paper, ink, my life. I stepped out of the car. The cold hit me like a slap, sharp and bracing. As I walked up the cracked sidewalk toward my parents' front door, the plastic turkey bobbed slightly in the wind, its painted eyes wide and oblivious. I took one last breath, trying to steady the pounding in my chest. Then I raised my hand and knocked. Mom opened the door on the second knock, wiping her hands on a dish towel, that practiced smile already on her face. "Ethan, there's my college boy," she said, voice bright like the last week had never happened. The smell of onions and roasting meat spilled into the cold air behind her. "Hey, Mom," I said. Her eyes flicked briefly to the folder in my hand, then back to my face. A tiny crack ran through the brightness, so fast most people wouldn't have noticed. I did. "You're early," she said. "We were just about to head over to Diane's. You want to ride with us or follow in your car?" "I'll follow," I said. "I have stuff in the trunk." She nodded too quickly, stepping aside. "Come in for a second, warm up. Your dad's just finding his good shirt." I stepped into the house. It smelled the way it always did on Thanksgiving week, like cooking oil and old carpet and the faint tang of whatever cleaner Mom had used to make things look presentable. Dad was in the living room, wrestling with a tie in front of the mirror. He turned when he heard my footsteps. "There he is," he said, "the man of the hour. How's university life treating you?" Like I owed it $80,000, I thought. "Fine," I said aloud. His gaze flicked to the folder, lingered, then skittered away. He tugged the tie knot tighter than necessary. The three of us did a little dance around the obvious, the way people do when there's a dead animal in the middle of the road and they're trying not to look directly at it. "We, got your emails," Mom said finally, smoothing her hair. "All those documents. Your concerns." Concerns. That was one word for it. "We can talk about that later," Dad said quickly. His voice clipped. "Tonight's about family. No need to drag all that into Diane's house." "Funny," I said, "because dragging all that into my life didn't seem to bother you." Silence dropped into the room like a brick. Mom's fingers twisted in the dish towel. "Ethan," she said, soft warning in her tone. "Please, let's not do this right now. Everyone will be there. Just let's get through dinner." I looked at her. Really looked at her. The lines around her mouth had deepened since I left for college. There were more gray threads in her hair. Part of me still wanted to make it easy, to swallow everything and pretend, but the stack of paper in my hands felt heavier. "I already tried not doing this," I said quietly. "For 19 years. That's done." Dad's jaw clenched. A muscle jumped in his cheek. "You wouldn't humiliate your mother like that," he said. The irony almost made me laugh. "We should go," Mom said quickly, grabbing her coat. "We'll be late. Diane will have a fit." She ushered us out with a flurry of movement, as if speed alone could outrun what was coming. The drive to Aunt Diane's was short. The neighborhood was full of cars, every driveway and curb packed. The Carter family migration, right on schedule. Aunt Diane's house glowed warm from every window. Through the front glass I could see movement, people moving dishes, kids weaving between legs, the TV flickering with football highlights. Dad parked on the street. For a second, we sat in the car, each of us staring at the house like it was a stage we were about to step onto. "You don't have to do this," Mom said, her hand finding my arm. "We can fix this, as a family, quietly." "We had our chance at quiet," I said. "You used it to open credit cards." I stepped out into the cold before she could answer. Inside, the familiar chaos swallowed me. Coats piled on the hall tree, the smell of turkey and cinnamon, my younger cousins shouting over a video game in the den. "Ethan!" Aunt Diane called, sweeping in with a dish towel draped over her shoulder. "Look at you, all grown up. College suits you. Come give your auntie a hug." I did. Her perfume enveloped me, vanilla and something floral. "How's campus?" she asked, already steering me toward the kitchen. "You staying out of trouble? Eating anything besides pizza?" "It's good," I said automatically. "Busy." Grandma was in her usual spot at the head of the kitchen table, peeling potatoes even though there were already more than enough. She peered up at me over her glasses. "There's my grandson," she said. "Come kiss your grandma. You keeping those grades up?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, bending to kiss her papery cheek. "As if he wouldn't," Mom said behind me, too quickly. "Our Ethan's the responsible one. Always has been." The words scraped like sandpaper. I glanced toward the dining room. The long table was already set. Plates, wine glasses, the good silverware. Place cards at each setting, Aunt Diane's looping handwriting spelling out names. Halfway down the table, I saw Jenna, already seated, typing something on her phone. She looked up just then and caught my eye. Her gaze flicked to the folder in my hand, then back to my face. She gave the tiniest of nods, The signal, I've got you. We all did the usual pre-dinner drift, snacking on deviled eggs, pretending to watch the game, fielding questions. "So what are you majoring in again?" Uncle Dan asked, cracking open a beer. "Political science," I said. "Oh, so you're going to be president?" He joked, same as he did every year. "Maybe he'll figure out how to balance the budget," Aunt Lisa chimed in. Laughter. If only they knew the kind of budget balancing I'd been doing. Finally, Aunt Diane clapped her hands. "All right, people," she called. "Turkey's ready. Get your butts in those chairs before everything gets cold." We filed into the dining room. I found my place card between Jenna and my grandparents. Across from me, Mom and Dad sat side by side, their faces carefully set. The picture of a hard-working, loving couple. As the food was passed, as plates filled, my heart started to pound in my chest like it was trying to escape. This was it. The normal Thanksgiving soundtrack played around me. Silverware clinking, cousins whisper bickering, uncles arguing about yardage. Grandma insisted the mashed potatoes needed more salt. Uncle Larry made an inappropriate joke about the stuffing. I barely tasted anything. As soon as the first round of eating slowed, the moment I knew everyone would be leaning back, hands on stomachs, Aunt Diane predictably said, "Let's go around and say what we're thankful for this year." Groans, eye rolls. It happened every year, and every year, everyone pretended to hate it. "I'll start," she said, never waiting for anyone else to volunteer. "I'm thankful we're all together, healthy, and that my boss finally retired so I don't have to deal with his nonsense anymore." Laughter. Around the table, people followed. Jobs, new babies, getting over the flu. When it got to Dad, he cleared his throat. "I'm thankful," he said, "for my beautiful wife who's been working so hard, and for our son making us proud at university. We sacrificed a lot to get him there, but it's worth it every time we hear how well he's doing." Several relatives murmured, "Ah." Grandma dabbed at her eyes. The words hit differently this year. Sacrificed, proud, worth it. Then all eyes turned to me. "What about you, Ethan?" Aunt Lisa asked. "What are you thankful for?" My fingers tightened around my fork. Under the table, Jenna's knee bumped mine. When I glanced at her, her gaze was steady, encouraging. I could have said something easy. Friends, school, the food. I could have swallowed the knot in my throat and let the holiday roll on like always. Instead, I took a breath I hoped no one could see and reached down beside my chair. "I'm thankful," I said slowly, "for the truth." The room shifted. Conversations quieted. Heads turned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Uncle Dan asked, half laughing. "That means," I said, pulling the folder up and laying it on the table like a third plate, "I found out something this week, about how much my parents have sacrificed for me." Mom's hand, reaching for her wineglass, froze. Dad's jaw clenched. "Ethan," Mom said sharply, "we don't need to." "Actually," Jenna cut in, her tone light but firm. "I think this sounds interesting. Go on, Ethan." Several heads swiveled toward her. Our Jenna the lawyer was speaking. That bought me a few more seconds of attention. I flipped the folder open. On top was a copy of the Sunrise Bank loan application. My name, my social, my parents' address, their lie about my income. I slid it toward the middle of the table, onto the pristine white tablecloth. The black ink looked stark against the fabric. 3 days ago," I said, voice surprisingly steady, "2 debt collectors showed up at my dorm. They said I owed almost $80,000 on credit I didn't know existed." A ripple went around the table. "What?" Grandma said, frowning. "They can't do that. That has to be a mistake." "That's what I thought," I said. So I pulled my credit report. Turns out there are 5 accounts in my name, opened between when I was 15 and 18, all attached to Mom and Dad's address, all maxed out or in collections. I slid more papers out, credit card applications, monthly statements, the driver's license scan. I didn't look at my parents as I spoke. I looked at my grandmother, at my aunts and uncles, at my cousins. "Here's one," I went on. "Capital State Platinum, opened when I was 16. It says I make $48,000 a year. Back then I was bagging groceries after school. Here's the signature, supposed to be mine." I pointed. The T crossed high, the looped H. "Recognize that?" I asked quietly, eyes narrowed, heads leaned in. "That looks like Linda's handwriting," Aunt Lisa said before she could stop herself, then slapped a hand over her mouth. A muscle jumped in Dad's cheek. "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "They're credit card forms. Who can tell anything from that?" Here's another, I said, ignoring him. Sunrise Bank personal loan, $25,000. Opened my junior year, same signature, same address. Monthly payments skipped for the last 6 months. Mark, Grandma said slowly, what is this? All kids have student loans, Ma, he said quickly, a false laugh bubbling up. It's normal. He's just being dramatic about it. We told him about it. Didn't we, Ethan? Dozens of eyes swung back to me. I held my grandmother's gaze. They didn't tell me anything, I said. I found out because debt collectors came to my door, at school. I was a minor when most of these were opened. That's illegal. Identity theft. Even if it's your own parents doing it. The last words dropped into the room like stones into water. Identity theft? Aunt Diane repeated, her hand pressing to her chest. Come on now, that's a big accusation. It's not an accusation, Jenna said calmly, speaking up for the first time. It's a legal term. If someone uses your personal information without your consent to open credit, it's identity theft, regardless of whether they're strangers or family. She picked up one of the papers, scanning it quickly. These forms list Ethan's income as way higher than it could have been, she said. He was a teenager. This isn't student aid. These are consumer credit accounts, opened in his name, without his knowledge. That's fraud. Mom's face had gone pale. We were going to pay them off, she said, her voice warbling. We always meant to. Things got tight. You know how expensive everything is these days. We only used his name so we could get approved. For the family. For the family? I repeated, the calm slipping a little. You mean for the TV, for the vacations, for the Amazon packages that showed up every other day? Those were for the family? We did it for you, Dad barked. For your future. So you'd have a house. So we could keep the roof over your head. I laughed once, harsh and humorless. If this had gone on any longer, I said, I wouldn't have a future. Do you know what 5 delinquent accounts do to someone's credit? To their ability to get housing, or a car loan, or a job even? You didn't just borrow my name, Dad. You mortgaged my whole life. The room was silent. The TV in the other room played a commercial jingle no one was listening to. Grandma reached for one of the papers with a trembling hand. Her eyes moved back and forth across the page. Linda, she said softly, tell me this isn't true. Mom's lip quivered. Ma, you don't understand. The hospital cut my hours. The mortgage went up. Groceries, gas. Everything costs so much now. We didn't qualify on our own. The bank refused us. We just needed a little help. You stole from your child, Grandma said. I had never heard her voice like that. Not angry, not yelling, just hollow. From my grandson. We always meant to pay it back, Mom whispered. Once he graduated, once he got a good job, he owes us that much after everything we did for him. There it was, the entitlement, naked now, stripped of justification. I looked around the table. Some faces were confused, some sympathetic, but more than a few looked disgusted. You can't just say he owes you his identity, Aunt Lisa said quietly. My God, Linda. Uncle Dan cleared his throat. Wait, are we talking criminal charges here? He asked Jenna, eyes wide. Potentially, she said. If Ethan files a police report, which he has every right to do, the DA could pursue charges. At minimum, the creditors and credit bureaus have to investigate. They'll look at signatures, dates, IP addresses. This isn't small. Mom turned to me then, eyes wide with a different kind of fear. You're not really going to do that, she said. Are you? Have us arrested? Ruin our lives over some pieces of paper? I stared at her. Over some pieces of paper. Behind my anger, something else simmered. Grief, maybe, for the illusion I'd lost. I've already started the dispute process, I said, with the banks, with the credit bureaus. To get this off my record, I haven't named you in anything yet. But if they ask, if law enforcement asks, I'm not going to lie for you. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly. You would betray your own parents? Dad spat. I pushed back my chair and stood up. Several people flinched at the sound of the chair legs scraping on the hardwood, like they'd expected me to flip the table. I didn't betray anyone, I said. I went to college. I worked my part-time job. I did everything you asked. I trusted you. You betrayed me when you signed my name to things I never saw. Over and over again. For years. And then decided that somehow I owed you silence. I love you, I went on, and that admission hurt more than anything. You're my parents, but love is not a blank check. You don't get to cash my future in without my consent and call it love. Silence settled over the table like snow. In the den, one of the younger kids yelled, "Touchdown!" completely oblivious. Uncle Larry cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, he said, that's a lot. Aunt Diane shot him a look that could have turned water to steam. I think, she said slowly, maybe we should all take a minute. People started pushing back from the table, the long choreographed dance of a family meal dissolving into scattered, confused movement. Jenna touched my arm. Come on, she murmured. Let's get some air. We stepped out onto the back porch. The cold wrapped around us like a shock. For a minute, we just stood there, breath puffing in the air, the muffled noise of the house leaking through the walls. You did good, she said finally. You didn't even throw the gravy boat. I'm impressed. A short, choked laugh escaped me. Halfway through, I wanted to climb under the table and never come out, I admitted. She bumped her shoulder against mine. You were clear. You were calm. You let the evidence speak. That's more than most people your age could do. Most people my age don't have to cross-examine their parents over turkey, I muttered. She hummed. True, but you also showed the rest of the family what was really going on. That matters too. Through the window, I saw Grandma standing over the table, hands planted on either side of the stack of documents, head bent. Mom was crying. Dad was pacing in the far corner of the room, gesturing wildly at Uncle Dan, who looked deeply uncomfortable. They're going to say I ruined Thanksgiving, I said. You didn't ruin anything, Jenna said. You just refused to keep playing along with their version of the story. They ruined your credit. Your holiday still has potential. She nudged me. Come on, we can still go for that weird canned cranberry sauce you like. We did go back inside eventually. The rest of the evening was strained. Some relatives avoided me, eyes sliding away when I approached the kitchen island. A couple of my cousins pulled me aside to whisper variations of, "Dude, that sucks," clearly out of their depth. Grandma hugged me so tightly my ribs hurt. We'll fix this, she said fiercely into my shoulder. You hear me? I didn't raise my boy to have his name dragged through the mud like this, not by my own daughter. Her voice cracked on daughter. Guilt stabbed at me. It's not your fault, Grandma, I said. No, she said, but I'm still allowed to be ashamed. Mom and Dad didn't come near me again that night. At some point, they slipped out. When I looked up from a conversation with Jenna, their coats were gone from the pile. I didn't follow them. I stayed at Aunt Diane's that night, sleeping on the lumpy pull-out couch in the den like I had as a kid. Only this time, instead of listening to the muffled sounds of adults laughing late into the night, I listened to dishes being washed in brittle silence and the low murmur of my aunts talking in the kitchen. Can't believe they do that. Always were bad with money, but this... Poor Ethan. The words blurred into a low buzz. I stared at the ceiling, the glow from the TV screen washing everything in pale blue. I felt hollow and raw and strangely lighter. The bomb had gone off. I wasn't the only one standing in the blast radius anymore. In the weeks that followed, the fallout settled. Back at school, life didn't snap back to normal. It rearranged itself around a new center. I filed the identity theft report with the FTC. I went to the police station in Dayton and filed a report there, too. I didn't write my parents' names in the box marked suspect. I wrote, unknown individuals used my information without consent. But when the officer asked verbally if I had any idea who might be responsible, I told him the truth. He winced in that way people do when reality collides with their idea of how the world should work. The DA may or may not pursue this, he said, typing. Family cases are complicated, but this paper trail helps with the credit disputes. It did. Slowly, over months, letters started to arrive. Capital State. After investigation, we have determined you did not authorize this account at the time of opening. We will be closing the account and removing the trade line from your credit report. Union Line, Metro Credit, Sunrise Bank. One by one, they acknowledged the obvious, that a minor couldn't have agreed to any of this. My credit score, which had cratered, started to crawl back up. It would take time, but it was movement. My parents called. A lot at first, voicemails filled with anger. How could you do this to us? Dad's voice would boom through my phone speaker. You turned us into criminals in front of the whole family. Then guilt. We're your parents, Ethan, Mom would say, tears audible. We made mistakes, but we're family. Families are supposed to forgive. Then silence. I didn't block their numbers. I listened to the messages. Then I deleted them. I wrote them one email, carefully, drafting and redrafting with Jenna's help. In it, I laid out boundaries. I told them I was not their financial plan, that any communication about the fraud would go through the proper channels, that I was working with creditors and bureaus to fix my file, and that I expected them not to obstruct that process. That I was open to some form of relationship in the future, maybe, but only if they took real responsibility. Not just for what they'd done to my credit, but for how they'd treated me as a resource instead of a child. I hit send. They didn't reply. My grandparents called more often. Grandma wanted updates on those blasted banks. Grandpa, usually quiet, told me stories about his own father's stubborn pride and the mess it had caused. There was a lot he hadn't talked about before. Now, suddenly, he wanted me to know the family ghosts I was up against. "Don't carry what isn't yours, son," he said one afternoon, his voice crackling through the cheap cell connection. "They made choices. You're making yours." Thanksgiving became a line down the middle of my life. Before, there had been a version of me who believed my parents' narrative without question. After, there was a version who knew, in an ugly, necessary way, that love could be twisted into justification. But there was also something else on the other side of that line. Proof that I could stand up. That my voice, even shaking, could carry more weight than their well-rehearsed lines. Finals came and went. Winter melted into spring. The debt collectors stopped calling. My credit report started to look less like crime scenes and more like a blank slate. One afternoon, sitting in the campus library, I pulled up my credit report again. There, under accounts, the list had shrunk. The fraudulent lines were marked disputed, resolved, removed. For the first time since that knock on my dorm door, my name didn't make my stomach clench. Tasha slid into the chair across from me, dropping a stack of textbooks. "What you doing?" she asked, craning her neck. "Admiring my non-criminal credit," I said, turning the laptop so she could see. She squinted. "Damn," she said. "Look at you, Mr. 720. From identity theft victim to we'd be happy to approve your apartment application in 6 short months." I laughed. "Don't jinx it. I still have to graduate, remember?" She sobered slightly. "Heard anything from your parents?" "Christmas card," I said. "Generic. Hope you're well. Love, Mom and Dad. No mention of anything. No apology." She made a face. Classic. I closed the laptop. "Jenna says that might be all I ever get," I said. "Some people can't admit what they did because then they'd have to live with who that makes them." "And you?" she asked. "Can you live with who you are after all this?" I thought about it. About the boy who'd believed his parents could never hurt him. About the young man who'd stood at a table full of relatives and laid out the receipts. About the person I was slowly becoming, someone who could love his family and still say no, even when it hurt. "I'm learning to," I said. She smiled. "Good, because I like this version of you, even if he's way more high maintenance than the old one." "Hey," I protested. "I was always high maintenance. You just didn't notice." We laughed, the sound echoing briefly between the stacks. That night, back in my dorm room, I pulled my folder of documents out one last time. The paper was a little wrinkled now, some edges frayed, coffee stains on one corner from late-night review sessions. I leafed through it. The forged signatures, the lies about my income, the credit bureau letters, the FTC report confirmation, the police report copy, evidence of something I'd never expected to have to prove. I took a deep breath and slid the whole stack into a new box. On the lid I wrote in black marker, "Past due, paid in full." It was cheesy, overly symbolic. Tasha would have rolled her eyes. But as I pushed the box under my bed, I felt something loosen inside my chest. My parents had opened accounts in my name without my consent. I'd opened one in my own heart without realizing it, a line of credit for their mistakes, an account where I kept letting them borrow trust, excuses, second chances, without ever demanding payment. For the first time, I'd closed it. Not because I stopped caring about them, but because I finally understood that protecting them at my expense wasn't love. Love, the real kind, had come from other places. From a roommate who stayed up all night printing documents and making bad jokes. From a cousin who sat beside me at a table full of tension and didn't flinch. From grandparents who, when the truth landed, chose to stand with me. From myself, reaching for something better than silence. Debt collectors had shown up at my dorm for $80,000 I never borrowed. I'd thought the worst thing that could happen was losing my financial future. What I almost lost, quietly, without realizing, was the belief that I was worth more than what other people took from me. But sitting there in that cramped room, listening to the dull thump of someone's bass down the hall, I realized something. You can rebuild credit. You can't get back years of your life spent paying on accounts you never opened. But you can decide from this moment on that every line you sign, on paper, in relationships, in the story you tell about yourself, will be yours, willing, informed, chosen. And if anyone tries to write your name without asking, you can take the pen back.